The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the streets of Chicago into rivers of blurred lights and hurried feet. Amelia's coat clung to her shoulders, soaked and heavy. She clutched her worn tote bag, shivering as she ducked under the awning of a small cafe she knew only by its hand-painted sign, Grindhouse Coffee. Inside, the warmth hit her like a soft blanket. Steam curled from the espresso machines, mingling with the scent of roasted beans. She spotted the corner table by the fogged window, the only place left. It was her moment of quiet, her only pause between the night shift at the hospital and the double shift waiting at the diner. She was late, always late. Life didn't give her breaks. She had to steal them. And then he walked in. A man in a gray coat, scarf frayed at the edges, hands trembling as he approached the counter. His movements were slow, careful, deliberate, as if the world had grown too fast for him to catch up. The barista smiled politely, waiting. But when the man fumbled for coins in a leather wallet that had seen better days, the small line behind him began to murmur impatiently. Coins clinked on the counter. He swore softly under his breath. Amelia's chest tightened. She knew what it was to be invisible, to feel the world's impatience pressing down. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Don't worry about it. I'll pay," she said, pressing a crumpled $5 bill across the counter. The man froze, blinking. You don't have to." "It's just coffee," Amelia said softly, smiling. "Maybe one day you'll pay it forward." He nodded slowly, clutching the cup as if it were a fragile promise. He moved to the corner, and for a moment, Amelia thought he might disappear like a shadow back into the gray morning. She didn't notice the way he watched her leave, nor the faint smile that tugged at the corner of his lips. Her days continued in a blur. Night shifts bled into morning, mornings into her second job at the diner. Between bills, rent, and her mother's medical expenses, life was a series of survival steps. That old man, that small gesture, it could have been forgotten. But the universe had other plans. 2 weeks later, she was scrubbing marble floors at an office downtown when a voice startled her. "Miss?" She turned, and her breath caught. It was him, the same man, but now his presence filled the room with authority. The frayed coat had been replaced with a tailored overcoat, shoes polished, a subtle scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. A sleek black car waited outside, glinting in the dull morning light. "You're—" she stammered. "I am Henry Whitmore," he said, calm and measured. His eyes, sharp yet warm, searched hers. "You bought me coffee once. That act, it stayed with me." Her mind spun. Whitmore? The billionaire? The reclusive man whose name appeared in the headlines but never the tabloids? She blinked. I don't understand." "You will," he said, with a hint of a smile. "Come with me. I'd like to talk." And over the next weeks, Henry became a quiet fixture in her life. Not in the loud, intrusive way billionaires appeared on television. No, this was subtle. He showed up with groceries once her mother fell sick. He offered books, novels, and histories she never had time to read. He listened, really listened, when she talked about her father, her late-night shifts, her hopes of returning to school. Their bond grew slowly, carefully, like the roots of a tree in winter. Henry, despite his wealth, carried a loneliness that even money could not fill. His family had been distant, fractured by ambition, greed, and resentment. Each photograph in his mansion told the story of lives grown apart, of holidays celebrated without warmth, of legacies hoarded rather than shared. Amelia reminded him of a world he had forgotten, of trust, kindness, and human decency. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the marble floors in gold, he asked, "Do you ever think about family, Amelia?" She hesitated, swallowing the lump in her throat. "All the time. I'd give anything to have mine whole again." He nodded, staring out the window, eyes heavy with memory. "So would I." The first test came unexpectedly. Henry invited Amelia to what he called a small gathering. She imagined a dinner with a few friends, maybe a quiet celebration of her birthday. Instead, she arrived to find the Whitmore estate shimmering under crystal chandeliers, the driveway lined with luxury cars. Guests in designer suits moved like shadows through the hall. She felt herself shrink under the weight of their eyes. "This is Amelia," Henry announced, his voice steady and warm. The room fell silent. A woman in a tailored dress, sharp eyes, colder smile stepped forward. "Is this your charity project, Uncle?" Amelia flushed crimson, ready to flee, but Henry's hand rested on her shoulder. "She's the only person in this room who acted without expectation," he said. "Kindness is a rarity. Notice it." The whispers spread like a slow poison, but Amelia held her head high. That night, she realized Henry's world was as lonely as her own, though its emptiness was masked in gold and marble. Days turned into weeks. Henry taught her about business, subtly how people's character showed in small moments, how empathy often outweighed strategy. Amelia, in turn, brought him fragments of her life. Hospital stories, laughter at clumsy diners, the rhythm of a life lived honestly. She remembered her father's voice. "Integrity is worth more than gold, Amelia. Remember that." Henry would nod as if her father's words were a secret pact between them, and in those moments, she saw glimpses of a man who had given everything to the wrong people, who had forgotten what made life meaningful. But shadows lingered. The Whitmore relatives were not silent. They whispered in corridors, plotted in hushed tones. They watched Amelia with suspicion. Some called her a fraud, a gold digger. Some even tried subtle manipulations, gifts she didn't want, flattery she couldn't return. Yet Henry's trust never wavered. One rainy morning, Amelia found a note slipped under her apartment door. The handwriting was elegant, familiar. "Is greater than, if you are reading this, you are already part of something larger. Do not be swayed by others. They will try to take what does not belong to them. Trust yourself, Amelia. H.W." Her hands shook as she folded it, realizing this was no ordinary friendship. Henry was testing more than her kindness. He was testing her heart, her integrity, her ability to see truth when the world disguised it in gold. The weeks following the gathering at the Whitmore estate were tense, yet quietly transformative. Amelia returned to her life, as she always had, hospital nights, diner mornings, and fleeting moments of stolen rest. But now, a shadow of possibility hovered over her. She often caught herself staring at her reflection, wondering if the world would ever see her differently. Not as a cleaning staffer, but as the woman Henry trusted with the pieces of his fractured life. Henry continued to test her, not with riddles or grand gestures, but with life itself. He asked her to sit in on board meetings, quietly observing the dynamics of a company worth billions. Amelia learned to recognize power not in money, but in restraint, empathy, and subtle observation. She began to understand why he'd survived the cutthroat corporate world, while his own relatives, greedy and calculating, had never risen above envy. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the horizon and the mansion's silhouette darkened in the twilight, Henry called her into his private library. The room smelled faintly of old leather and cedar. He gestured for her to sit, his face unusually solemn. "Amelia," he began, voice low and deliberate, "there's something I must tell you. My family, my relatives, they will not stop until everything I have is in their hands. They think I'm dying, and they believe the fortune should go to them. I need someone I can trust to carry on what matters." Amelia's heart beat fast. She had anticipated this moment, yet the weight of it pressed on her chest. "You want me to manage it?" she asked. Henry nodded, eyes glimmering with both hope and weariness. "Not just manage, to protect the integrity of it, to remember what kindness and responsibility mean in a world that often forgets both." The first confrontation came sooner than expected. Aunt Sylvia, a sharp-tongued woman in her 60s, with more ambition than warmth, cornered Amelia in the drawing room. "You think you can waltz into this family and claim what's ours? You're nothing but a charity case. Uncle Henry is too blind to see what you really are." Amelia's hands shook, but she held her voice steady. "I don't want what's yours. I only want to honor what Uncle Henry taught me." Sylvia scoffed. "You'll regret this. Everyone does. Families like ours don't give away empires to strangers." It was then that Amelia realized the test Henry had been giving her was far bigger than coffee, far bigger than simple kindness. This was life itself, navigating greed, envy, and moral compromise with courage. In the weeks that followed, the tension escalated. The Whitmore relatives tried everything, questioning her credentials, leaking false stories to the press, even subtle attempts at intimidation. Amelia remained quiet, measured, observing, and documenting every action. Meanwhile, Henry grew frailer. His once commanding presence was now tinged with visible exhaustion. He refused to let his illness control his decisions, but Amelia could see the toll it took. One night, as she helped him to a chair near the fireplace, he whispered, "I can feel my time drawing near, but I am not afraid. You've proven what matters more than wealth: a good heart." Tears burned her eyes. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," she admitted. "You are," he said. "I've seen you in ways no one else will. Remember the cafe, Amelia. Remember the first cup of coffee. That moment told me everything." Then came the final day. Henry had fallen ill suddenly, and the mansion was filled with a tense quiet. The relatives, who had once whispered and plotted, now feigned concern. Amelia stayed at his side, holding his hand, feeling the weight of both loss and responsibility pressing down on her. Before slipping into unconsciousness, Henry managed a faint smile. "Trust yourself. That is all I ask. Protect the good." He never spoke again. The reading of the will was public, yet chaotic. Lawyers and media surrounded the estate. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and Amelia felt the scrutiny like a physical weight on her shoulders. Sylvia stepped forward, voice dripping with contempt. "This is outrageous! He promised it to us!" The lawyer, calm and authoritative, opened the envelope. The late Mr. Henry Whitmore stipulated in his final will, "The entirety of Whitmore Holdings, the estate, and all personal assets are to be placed in a trust under the care of Amelia Parker. Conditions: maintain the integrity of the estate, continue charitable initiatives, and uphold the values exemplified by Mr. Whitmore." Gasps echoed through the hall. Amelia's hands trembled. She looked at the faces of the relatives' disbelief, anger, betrayal, but she also felt a surge of responsibility, the enormity of what lay before her. Henry's vision was clear. Wealth was meaningless if it corrupted the soul. His legacy was not gold or property, but the principle that kindness and integrity must guide power. Amelia took her new role seriously. She returned to the cafe where it all began, buying coffee for strangers, quietly and without recognition. She converted part of the mansion into a community center, providing scholarships for single mothers and medical aid for the underprivileged. She met resistance from former employees of Whitmore Holdings who saw her as inexperienced. She faced board members who doubted her decisions. Yet every challenge reminded her of Henry's lessons: patience, observation, and moral courage. One afternoon, while walking through the mansion's vast library, she paused in front of the old leather-bound journals Henry had kept. Notes, reflections, and lessons filled every page. She ran her fingers along them, reading passages he had highlighted. "Is greater than, integrity outweighs profit, empathy outweighs ambition. A good heart is rarer than gold, but far more valuable." It was then that Amelia realized the full measure of his gift. Henry had not just left her money. He had left her a blueprint for a life that mattered, for a legacy that endured beyond death, beyond greed, beyond the empty trappings of wealth. Years passed. Amelia's reputation grew quietly. Whitmore Holdings thrived under her leadership, not through ruthless expansion, but by balancing profit with humanity. She never flaunted her fortune. She never forgot her roots, and every now and then she would return to the cafe, leaving a cup of coffee for someone in need. People began calling it the Whitmore tradition, a small act, repeated over time, echoing the lesson Henry had taught her, that kindness, is the truest form of power. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of her memory, she still heard his voice. Is greater than. The world is heavy with greed and ambition, Amelia. But you carry the light. Even decades later, when headlines faded and the empire had become part of a new era, Amelia remembered that first rainy Tuesday. That single cup of coffee had changed everything. It had built not just an empire, but a life of purpose, a legacy of goodness, and a reminder that even the smallest gestures, a kind word, a helping hand, a shared cup of coffee can alter the course of a life. And in that, she found true wealth.